Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic. That was a wonderful acronym. That's called an acronym when something spells out by capital or the first letters of a phrase for Clancy. And now during the rest of my talk, perhaps you would just make out some phrases for this. Shut up. I don't even like to be attacked in English. I am very glad to be here in front of this distinguished assemblage at the Gopher State Roundup. I see they have the TV cameras beaming into all the hospitality rooms, so I want to welcome you to your own individual half-measure room. Perhaps those of you in your room can ask her to go over and turn off the TV now. Did I say something wrong? I have been very pleased to be here. As most of you know, I'm from this area, up over in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We have a token smattering of attenders from Eau Claire tonight. We're over here looking for some vicious thing to take back to the local group about me. But I really have enjoyed this meeting. I want to thank the committee very much for inviting us. All of us have been assigned hosts, and I've been very blessed. My host came to the airport, wished me well, and I haven't seen him since. He almost got me a couple times, but I took an elevator quick. But seriously, my host is Marv S., and a long-term friend of mine. I'm glad to have him here. I want to give a special thanks to Paul B., who gave me one of his sleds to take down to Eau Claire yesterday to visit my little old mother. A sled in the used or leasing car business is a car. We call them a sled, and as they used to say, we want to get a mooch on the lot and stuff him into a sled and get him out of here. And I had a diesel-powered Cadillac, and it was really grand, and I enjoyed the trip, and I think that $50 a day is not too much to pay, and I want to thank you very much, Paul. And I very much enjoyed all the speakers. I mentioned last night when I was chairing the meeting that I knew all of these speakers, had heard them several times, knew nearly all of them away from the podium, and that they were all good A's, and they certainly are. I thought that Hank gave a very fine talk last night, and I'm always glad to hear him talk, and because as I said last night, I am more familiar than with most of his early days and what he was like and what happened and what he's like today, and he's done an excellent job. And his charming wife, Lou, and they're on their way to Detroit, I guess, for the summer race riots. That's when all the Swedes rise and make their move on City Hall. And Ann gave a very fine talk last night. She always has a profoundly touching message, and she really was she had as bad a history as almost any woman I know, and she has come back from that with flying colors and has become a good... In fact, while you thought we were probably telling each other how wonderful we were doing up here at the podium before the meeting, we were talking about our children and how glad we were we had been severe parents so they wouldn't turn out the way we had turned out. And this morning, I very much enjoyed the cowboy. I've known him for some time. His accent gets thicker the further east he gets. He hasn't He doesn't talk much like that around Rock Springs. He sounds like a New Yorker, but out here he's a... But he gave a touching and fine talk, and his father and I are friends, and we correspond up in Big Piney, Wyoming, and he's a good old man. And Buck, who I've known for many years, his wife and I, his wife was recently deceased, lovely lady, but she and I were in the same insane asylum in Texas, and we had a deep bond. She just got to the alcoholic ward. She never made it all the way to the electric shock ward. Like, she was from the South. She didn't hear those ominous words, "Let's hep that little Yankee son bitch." And this afternoon, Blanche gave a touching talk. It is kind of a touching talk at a convention when you're in Al-Anon, talk about the dissolution of a 30-year marriage. And sometimes that's necessary, I guess. And since I'm a Norwegian Lutheran in Los Angeles, you know, Norwegian Lutherans, nobody ever heard of Norwegian Lutherans out there, but here it's nice to be in the majority just once, just to be. And I'm going to sit tonight and, like I did last night, scowl at them Catholics. I'll tell you, my grandmother in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, started a long decline into death when they founded the St. Olaf Catholic Church in Minneapolis. What she said was, "Oofda." And we're going to have another Catholic speak later tonight, but a fine speaker who I've known for some time. And tomorrow morning, Frank M., the distinguished divorce attorney from Chicago, who's the only one I know who's continually wearing diamonds over the disintegration of the American home. I've had an especially good day today. This afternoon, after the meeting, Frank and I took a little walk around the park. There's a little lake over here, and we walked. There's a 1.9-mile walk in the sun. And also some guy said there's a couple of us here from Fargo-Moorhead, Minnesota, and we'd like to talk to... And he said, could we come up to your room and visit with you? And I tried to be in a nice mood. Don't mind talking to a couple guys from Fargo-Moorhead, Minnesota. You know, it's nice to have lower companions seek me out for a change. So there came a tapping at my chamber door, and I opened the door, and here came this mob. Will you guys from Fargo-Moorhead please stand up just a second? And they all sat there and said, tell us what you know. And as it turned out, I only knew 20 minutes worth, so I guess the rest of my talk is just going to be Phil. Nice to have you here. It's young folks such as you who are the leaders of AA tomorrow, and I'm certainly glad I won't be around to see it. In all the history of AA, that's the first time in AA's history that the words Fargo-Moorhead have ever appeared on a tape, and that'll be something for you to cherish. I used to drink, and I drank for... I just wanted to slip that in between my personal remarks. Now I want to get back to the committee here. I drank for many years. I had my first drink on a ship in the Pacific in World War II. I was a very young man. I had run away from Eau Claire to make I wanted to get out there with John Wayne and kill Japs, and I went to sea without any training, and I was on a ship on my 16th birthday. I was on a ship full of torpedo warheads in the South Pacific, and I was just panic-stricken. And on that ship, somebody gave me a drink, and I threw it up, and later I had another drink, and I threw that up, and I kept doing that until I finally held one down. Going to take that kid to hear Betty H. in the atrium. As Annie said, I've been every place, but I've only been there once. I don't know why. I never get invited back. And I had my last drink a great many years later, and in all of that time I drank, to me, alcohol. I went to my first AA meeting something over almost 35 years ago. That's a long time ago. Over 30 years ago, I was 86th out of 2218 First Avenue South. Just a young folks trying to make my way and drinking a little bit on the property. I went to AA. I went to my first AA meeting a long time ago, and it seemed like a dull exercise for old fools is what it was. I went to my first AA meeting in Eau Claire when I was still in college, and they were just, old, as far as I could tell, old, gray, burned out old fools in their late 30s and early 40s. And as far as I could remember, I can't remember, but it seemed to me the image I always had was some old gray, gaunt skull got up there. I drank for many years. And one day I walked through that door. And now I haven't drunk. And I've just never been so happy. And I was a young guy with my life in front of me, a man back from over there. As my friend Clint says, a steely-eyed, sex-crazed killer. And I wanted to get out in the world, and I found that alcohol made me feel better in the Pacific, and it made me feel better when I got back to the Pacific, and it made me feel better in the Navy later, and it made me feel better in the college, and made me feel better all over. And alcohol to me, I have thought about this many times. Alcohol, I used to think, and still in a sense do, alcohol was the best friend I ever had. I never had a friend as good as alcohol. Today it still hurts me when I hear people get at the podium and just denounce alcohol completely. Just, terrible, never was any good. Oh, it's like hearing somebody badmouth an old girlfriend, it's just she's not much now, but God, she used to be. Oh, no pictures. Your best friends, I'll tell you, they come and go. Who your best friend is, Al, 3 years from now may not be your best friend. You may have a different best friends. People change, and some of you young guys here tonight it may be impossible for you to realize that you think that your happiness depends upon her smile. Well, I'll tell you a little shock. 3 years from now, you may not remember her name. Yeah. And all but a drink, when it does the job, goes on wherever you are, whenever you are, it just gives you that edge and just makes it a little bit better. And to me, I know that drinking caused me some problems, and I used to try to control it. I look over my drinking days, and my use of alcohol was very similar, I suppose, to America's or the world's progress in dealing with nuclear fission. When it works, it just works beautifully. It's just the lights go on and off and the wheels go around, but every so often there's a leak and a mushroom-shaped cloud appears and, oh God. And I was just kind of a walking 3-mile island. I forgot to watch that gauge, and on and on. Because I spent a great deal of time examining myself. I thought I was the only one who had that role in life. I thought the others just went through life, and I had the advantage of taking time to examine myself. But it turns out I've come into an organization composed almost entirely of self-analyzers and examiners. But I examined myself a lot and sifted things out and evaluated things. And I came to the conclusion that probably my emotions were my problem, because my emotions were more intense than other people's. Well, it's easy for you to laugh. You have no idea what it's like. My emotions were more more on the surface. When I was young and didn't know any better, I thought my emotions were different. As I got older, I realized I read a lot of books on psychology and human behaviorisms, and I came to the conclusion my emotions aren't different, but they're more intense and they're more vulnerable. I seem to be more vulnerable. And I'll tell you, there's a little trap that people like me, and I suppose like you, fall into. I used to think at one time I didn't understand it, then after I was sober a while I began to understand the pattern anyway. Then I began to work with other people and saw it happen to them, and then I got on my feet again and worked back in big corporations and with corporation presidents and saw it happen to them. So I guess it happens to all mankind, but you don't even know what's happening. And that is, there's a little trap people fall into, and that little trap is, when you're feeling insecure or feeling threatened or feeling bad, you fall into this trap. And people like us fall into it a lot because those are three of the leading symptoms of our disease: feeling threatened and trapped and insecure. And that is, when you're feeling bad, to start examining yourself and then look at others to see how you're doing and why you are different, or why you are different from them. And you examine, and everybody does it sometimes. You usually do it when you're feeling bad. Hardly anybody examines when they're feeling good. They examine when they're feeling bad. And there's only one thing wrong with these examinations, and that is the answer you get is always wrong. And the reason the answer is always wrong is because no one ever seems to realize who's doing the examining. I am comparing my insides against their outsides. I am comparing my raw meat against defense mechanisms they've spent 30 years building to conceal their raw meat. So as a result, I think it's safe to say when you're feeling bad and you look around you, I make this statement without any fear of contradiction, I think, you will never see anyone who looks as sensitive as you feel. You will never see anyone who looks as though they have the anxiety you feel. You will never see anyone who seems to have these waves of inadequacy for no apparent reason that you have. You will never see anyone who seems to have kind of the deep loneliness you suffer from. You know, everybody gets lonely, for example. We all know that. But when I'm lonely, it's a different form of loneliness. It's a deep, soul-wrenching loneliness. Other people, when they're lonely, say, I'm going to call up Fred and we're going to go to the show. But when I'm lonely, I don't want to see Fred. I don't want to see nobody. I've spent a lot of time in my life sitting in my room in my own house thinking, what went wrong? What went wrong? Having a drink, just thinking, what went wrong? And if you're a romanticist like I am, you have a record that you play, a favorite song, like Hank and his 78s, or Carl going out to listen to the cows hump each other. A song that evokes memories, and my song always was, just sing along. Birds fly over the rainbow, why can't I guess that there must be young people today who are neurotic in that same way and misfits, but it must be a bitch with this kind of music. And it turns out my type of loneliness is really, it looks painful, but there's a certain deliciousness to it, kind of a masochistic pleasure. It's just, you sit there and just feel so bad. It's like having your own portable cross and just setting up and hanging it. And you'll never see anyone who looks as resentful of unfairness as you are. And people who don't seem to understand that there's something basically wrong in the American corporate structure. The crapheads float to the top. It's just... And they bring along their brown nosers, and people of integrity are left behind. because they won't sell out. Who might sell out if they could get a decent chance. Can't even get a decent chance to sell out. But I battled these and many other emotions all my adult life. I went into psychoanalysis over 30 years ago. Because I wanted on my way to becoming something. I had done something strange in college that had caused me some problems. I had want to hurt our two speakers, but I'd married a Catholic. And my grandmother said, oh, Sonny, don't marry a Catholic. Just shouldn't do that. And I said, Grandmother, this is the brave new post-war world. There's no time for that pre-war bigotry. We're Americans, and we're together. And I married this Catholic girl, and my grandmother was right. It wasn't that she was a bad woman, just the opposite. She was a good woman, and there's hardly anything worse than a good Catholic. There's something that no young Protestant boy has ever told about. There's one fact they never told him, and that is this. If you marry a good Catholic, you are about to become the head of a rapidly growing family. Yeah. Ready or not. And, I used to plead with her. I'd say, Charlotte, can't we use some form of birth? This is the brave new post-war world. Can't we use birth control? No. I said, could we just get something for the prevention of disease? They sell them in a vending machine over there. No. So they had the priest come by one day, and he gave me about an hour and a half on the rhythm system, which is the Catholic version of birth control, and I listened intently, and I just couldn't pick up that beat. So it seemed like every time the pressure was on, there was a new Catholic I added to the world. Just boom, boom, boom. I got to be a distributor, a national distributor of small Catholics. It just boom, boom. And that really keeps the heat on you when you're fighting for integrity, I'll tell you. And I went to this psychoanalyst, and I learned a great deal about what caused me to be that way. I realized that I'd been scarred by the Depression. Didn't even know there'd been a Depression. Everybody knew Claire was poor, so I guess. I discovered that I'd run away to sea to her. I found out that I'd been scarred by having to stay with my grandparents when I was little, because my parents had to go teach in other cities to make it, and on and on. The only thing wrong with psychoanalysis is you learn so much exactly about what happened that it blinds you to the fact you're not getting any better. You're just. Now it sounds as though I'm denigrating psychiatrists, and if there are any psychiatrists here, I'm not at all. To this day, I see a psychiatrist twice a week. And a lot of people question me. They say, if AA works as well as you say it works, why do you see the psychiatrist twice a week? And the answer is always very simple. It's because I've told them I won't be a sponsor if you don't come to them meetings. That's all. He and I've got a deal. As soon as he straightens out, he's going to straighten me out. But he's sober, but he doesn't get the intellectual part of the program. I went into metaphysics. I did a lot of things. I got to meet a lot of people that I think they're the first ones who were discovering metaphysics. I was deeply into metaphysics years and years ago. At one time, to the best of my knowledge, I was one of 6 people in the whole state of Texas who knew truth. And that's a heavy load to carry in Texas. Truth is not really a big commodity there. I read Nietzsche, and I read Schopenhauer, because that's what imitation intellectuals should do, and read and study and evaluate. But the greatest friend I ever had all those years was one I paid no attention to, and that was when it got bad enough to have a few drinks. Just to have a few drinks, just to ease off, just to have a few drinks, just to make it all right. And sometimes when the pressure was too great, I had a tendency to drink more than I should. And sometimes I was known to be drunky poo. And because of this harsh restrictions of my Norwegian Lutheran background and the terrible pressures I had put upon me, when I drank, I burst loose with a rather bizarre style. And I was arrested often, and I remember going through a phase in about 1951 where I fancied myself as kind of a Captain Justice, where I would see stinking cops arresting Americans to satisfy their own fascist ideas, and I'd step in there if I had just the right amount of alcohol. You can't do this. We were over there and fought a war to have democracy and freedom, not to have some fascist blue-coated puke arrest somebody just because they don't know what else to do. Now that sounds extreme, but on 2 different occasions at least, I got the policeman to release the guy and take me. That ended my Captain Justice experiments for one day at a time, kid. Let him arrest you. And I drank. And sometimes I drank so much, and when I drank, it seemed like everything just went to hell. And so I've had some good days and some bad days. One spring, I was nominated to be Junior Chamber of Commerce Young Man of the Year in a suburb of Chicago, way up north. And I was doing well and had a wife and children and was holding it together. That was in February. By the end of that same year, 10 months later, through a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, I was playing piano in a whorehouse in San Francisco. Yeah. I'm not putting that down. That's kind of exciting for a Lutheran. They must wash a lot up there, a lot of towels. The only hard thing wrong with that, those are the kind of experiences that are kind of difficult to work into your resume later. You just, a lot of people like me have resumes with big holes where it says self-employed during this period. Studying, getting a degree at a university that later burned down without a trace. But I always reformed. I used to blame the Lutheran Church for that. I don't anymore, but I used to blame them. That damn Lutheran Church, they never made me good enough to stay good, but they made me just good enough so I can't enjoy evil very long. I have no facility for good, and I have a natural flair for evil. It's just up and up and up. So I finally reformed. I was always reforming, and my family was back on a farm in Wisconsin. I ran into a guy I'd been in the Navy with in World War II, and he was going to Texas. We wound up in Texas, and I worked very hard to get started again. And a year and a half later, in the spring of that year, in the daytime I was writing copy in a big advertising agency. At night I was on the faculty of the University of Texas directing a grand opera in Italian. Kind of fun watching Texans sing Italian. And I was writing a weekly sports column because sports has always been my bag. Now that's kind of a wide eater. I brought my wife and children in. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another little Catholic hit the street. And I was trying to hold it together, and this spring I would really look like I had it on my way, and through a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, by the end of that year I was confined for an indefinite to life in the Texas State Insane Asylum in Big Spring, Texas. There was, not in the alcoholic ward, in the psychotic, because I'd committed suicide, and successfully. And the reason I'd committed suicide is because I lost my buffer, because the dean of the university called me in with his little thin blue lips. Everybody here has seen those kind of people. Now this is for your own good. And I gave him my impression of an Italian leper. Just you didn't see that. Just forget it. I don't want those kind of things to get back to Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I had to go on the wagon to hold my job. And since my wife was pregnant, when I go on the wagon too long, and I went back to A&A and that once a week, whether I need it or not, and watch those old fools get there. You just keep coming back, and it gets better and better. And you just feel half crazy. You want to. I remember once I was just so desperate, I threw it out and I said, maybe these guys can help me. I can't see how they can, but maybe I said, I got a bunch of hot checks out. If I don't make them good by Monday, they're going to garnish my wages. I'll lose my job. What do I do? Well, you just turn it over. time I said to them, I think I'm going crazy. I just think I'm going crazy. Well, you keep coming back. That doesn't, there's a certain credibility missing to the perceptive mind in that kind of answer. I finally one day, just when my wife took the children to church, went in the garage, hooked the motor in the car, turned it on, went to sleep and died. And the guy next door heard the motor running and kicked down the door and pulled me out, and I was dead, and they beat on my chest and breathed in my mouth and took me to the psych ward and examined me for a week and a half and determined I was a severely split personality and committed me for an indefinite, up to the rest of my life, at the Texas State Mental Hospital in Big Spring, Texas. Well, I thought I was depressed before. Jesus. That is what you call your basic resume buster, boy. That hole goes up. The only thing I ever thought funny about that, I wanted to get back to that doctor sometime later and say, hey, doctor, I should sue you for malpractice. You accuse me of having a dual personality. You have misdiagnosed this case so badly. If I could get my personalities down to 2, I could make it from there. It's this group therapy when I'm driving alone in my car. Well, I almost didn't get out of that nut house. I escaped once, and unfortunately, there's no place to run in West Texas. You just... There he goes now. Get him, Lamar Jean. And they brought me back and gave me a whole autumn full of electric shock treatments, and they knocked me crazy. By the end of that year, I was just the most docile patient they had. They saw in my record that I directed an opera at the University of Texas. They allowed me to direct the Christmas pageant at the Nut House that year. Just kind of a second-grade level so the whole student body could follow along, you know. It wasn't very difficult to direct. The director's main job was just, if you possibly could, to try to hold the 3 wise men off the Virgin Mary. Just, we just want to worship her, Clancy. Well, the next year, they put in an alcoholic ward, and I pretended to be an alcoholic based on my 7 years around AA, and I got out. And the next year after that, in the spring, I was doing wonderfully, and I was working in Dallas, the largest advertising agency in the South. I was working on these ads. If you're old, you remember them. The Elsie and Elmer ads for the Borden Company, and I was hot again, and my wife 9 months and 10 seconds after we reunited. And had a lovely home in Highland Park, and through a series of bad breaks and misunderstandings, I woke up one morning and I was in the Phoenix, Arizona drunk tank. That's funny, huh? Wait till you get to the part where I die of cancer. You like that? I woke up and some guy had just got done kicking all my front teeth out. Oh, you're funny, really funny. That's a good one. And I was so sick I couldn't even move my head. That was one of the few mornings I was ever glad I'd been in psychoanalysis. I spent $1,000 in psychoanalysis. And I was glad I'd spent it because years later I woke up in this morning, the guy was kicking my front teeth out. And I was too sick to move my head out of the way of his shoe, but I was almost instantly able to identify his problem. I remember thinking, this son of a bitch is overreacting. Makes you superior. And by that time, my wife had left me and taken all the children. And I was, 2 months after that, I found myself being 86th out of a Skid Row mission on Los Angeles Skid Row for my attitudes. And I was down to a T-shirt and a pair of pants and a pair of tennies and no front teeth. And there's something going wrong. And I'll tell you, if a guy were to come by and put a lie detector in my arm and said, "Are you an alcoholic?" I would have said, "No, I'm not." And that needle would not have moved a sick. And I knew I wasn't really an alcoholic because, unlike real alcoholics, I was cursed with deep-seated emotions, and their problem was drinking, and mine was thinking and feeling. And if I could find the right place, the right niche, the right something, I'd be there. And one morning, as the cold rain falling, they refused to take my blood at the Skid Row blood bank, so I didn't have enough iron left in my blood that day. And I walked 72 blocks out to the A&A Club, At Wilshire and Fairfax, I started to go with the guy. I said, you can't come in here. I said, why not? He says, remember you're 86th out of here for stealing the coffee money 2 weeks ago. Oh yeah, that's right. So I better pretend to be an alcoholic. I said, I guess I had a little slip. He says, you didn't have a slip, you're just a phony. And I said, I guess you're right, Tom. But I thought, someday I'm going to pull out your fingernails. Listen to you scream. He says, why don't you go in the back room? Don't anybody know I let you in? You make me sick. God bless you, Tom. And I thought, I'm going to take those fingernails, heat them, and put them in your eyes. And I lay on that back sofa in that back room, and I threw up, and I thought, I got to pretend to be an alcoholic for a while till I can get something together. This is really, I'm getting in bad shape. I'm dying, you know. So I pretended to be an alcoholic, and I played their sick little game, and I got a sponsor. Nothing ever got better. I just had a terrible time. I was living last night, or this morning, Carl mentioned living in a car. He was living in his own car, and it ran. I was living in somebody else's car, and it didn't run. It was abandoned in the AA Club parking lot. And I lived in that car month after month, waiting to make my move. You know, sometimes I really felt excited. I'd go up in the front seat and go, and I had no idea then or for a long time thereafter that they would take advantage of my sickness and weakness and pain to brainwash me, make me sell out what integrity I had left, and play their sick little game forever. And they did, and now, a couple of months from now, I'll celebrate my 25th birthday in AA. That is not to get applause, that's for you to start thinking about your presents. I haven't had a drink since that morning in 1958. I haven't had a pill. I haven't smoked any marijuana. It's funny, in this day and age, there are still little clusters of weeds who grow up alongside the road of happy destiny. And they all think they're the first ones who ever said it, you know.
Book doesn't mention pot, baby.
It mentions people who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. That's close enough. I had a good memory recently of my drinking days, or my bad days. One time when I was at Big Spring State Hospital, there was during a full moon, and sometimes when people got rattled, the violent word got kind of bad. And there'd be screaming in the night. You know, hearts, and people running up and down the halls, and just, and I had never remembered that till last night. I'm glad that they, I guess there are wonderful young folks, and we don't judge in AA, but if they were my little kids, I'd break their legs. So I'm here tonight, and as you can tell, I got front teeth. Something has changed. You know, if you are new and you've lost some teeth and you're concerned about it, let me tell you something. Once you really turn the corner into spirituality, these teeth come back. Just trying to give you a little hope. They say you shouldn't pick your teeth in public. That's how I got these. I said, I'll pick them sharp ones, Doc. I had a difficult time holding a job. By the time I was a year sober, I finally worked myself up to wrapping packages in the back of an advertising agency, the same kind of job I'd had when I was 14. When I was a couple of years sober, I got a little job in a medical corporation. I had a terrible sponsor. Let me tell you something else. Sponsorship is some question about AA, but I'll tell you about sponsorship in my opinion. All the years I was in and out of AA, I knew what a sponsor was. And I had sponsors. I had a sponsor in Dallas, I had a sponsor in El Paso, I had a sponsor in San Francisco, I had a sponsor in Chicago, I had a sponsor in every place I've been. And to me, a sponsor, let me tell you what a sponsor is. You try to listen to find someone who says, I have unjudging love. Because I'm sick of being judged. And then you get that goof to be your sponsor. If he's really sincere about not judging you, you keep him. And then you try to stay away from him. And the only time you ever really call him is when you call him at 2 o'clock in the morning finally and say, "Hello, Fred. I'm afraid I've let you and AA down." Now, if you have a good sponsor, you say, "No, you haven't let us down. You're not bad. You're sick. You've had a relapse, that's all. I'll get some of the guys. We'll come over right now and we'll sit up with you all night long. We'll get you through this. If you need money, let me know, and we'll get you through this. We'll help you. I'll bring a pint so you won't go into DTs." Now, that's what I call a sponsor. I had sunk so low I got some old fool that didn't understand newcomers. And he said things to me like, "Kid, call me anytime you wanna, before you drink. But after you drink, don't bother calling, because all you're going to hear is a click and a dial tone." I was living in this abandoned car, living from hand to mouth. And I said to him, "Bob, I can't take it anymore. I'm cold, I sleep in the damn car, I get up dirty, and I'm hungry all the time. I got rags on. What'll I do, Bob?" He says, "Get a job." I said, "Look how terrible I look." He says, "Get a terrible job." One time, when I was 6 months old, I'd just been fired as a dishwasher because I was under the impression the busboys were bringing in dishes from other restaurants. I've never been paranoid, but there's been a lot of paranoids trying to get me, I'll tell you that. I remember calling him up and said, "Bob, what am I going to do?" And he says, "Write your engines high." I said, "That's the last thing in the world I need, Bob. I'm so caught up in memories now. My judgment, that'll kill me." He said, "Your judgment? Who cares about your stinking judgment? You're in an abandoned car, for Christ's sake." I live in a $300,000 house in Pacific Palisades. If I want your judgment, I'll come down there and stick my head in the window and ask you for it. Remember, I was going to call, if I'd had the money, I'd have called the New York World Service office that day. I didn't have the money. "Just want you to know, there's an old timer on the West Coast killing newcomers." Funny how the world spins. Now when I call the World Service office, or they call me from New York, I say, "No, I'm not." But I went to work every day to please that sponsor. I finally got to be a director of advertising at this medical corporation I started writing. By the time I was 7 years sober, I was in Hollywood working in radio and television. I'd become hip and slick again. And another guy and I created the #1 hard rock station in the world, something called Boss Radio. And by the time I was 10 years sober, I was downtown doing public relations at an oil company. I was 15 years sober, I was marketing director for a publishing firm in Beverly Hills. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet all the way to Dallas. Leaped out of their post office box with hoarse cries, fled to my side. 9 months and 10 seconds later. In fact, that little puke just graduated from high school last week, and from a Catholic high school where he's been playing center for the last 3 years. And I think it was my little AA boy, and I think my little AA son. I forget, I talked to him like he's my little AA son. I say, "Clancy, you didn't clean your room. It's a mess. Shave up." And I forget, someday my little AA boy's going to say, "I'll do it, son, I'll do it." I'll tell you something. Let me just say a few words. All of this is very nice, and I live in a comfortable house, and I just talked to my family a few minutes ago. But the most important thing I've said tonight, or I'll say before I sit down, I said, "My name is Clancy Imislund, and I'm an alcoholic." That was the single most difficult thing for me to come to believe in my life. How can you be an alcoholic when your problem really isn't alcohol? It is sometimes, but not really. Not like those alcoholics whose problem is caused by drinking. I drink for an escape, and sometimes it gets out of hand, but stopping drinking does not remove the problem. It just makes it more intense. Now, how could you be an alcoholic if your problem isn't alcohol? And that's why I want to spend a couple minutes on that. I'm certainly glad that I survived, and I fell into the hands of people in AA who were willing to weather my dislike of them in order to save my life, to learn this most important fact. And it sounds upside down and sounds backwards, so I want to say it very slowly. I had to come to understand, if my problem is alcohol, I am not an alcoholic. Or conversely, if I am an alcoholic, my problem is not alcohol. Now that sounds upside down to many people, new people especially. But I'll tell you something, if your problem is alcohol, and sometimes you hear speakers who sound as though it is, they say things like, all my life, when I was sober, I was just wonderful. Then I got drunk and I just went crazy. When I got sober, everything was wonderful. Then I drunk and I just went crazy. When I got sober, everything was wonderful. Then I got drunk. You just want to say, why do you drink? Well, if I could get it wonderful, I wouldn't drink. If you're one of those people whose problem is drinking, I have a solution for you that's going to revolutionize your life. Don't drink, you fool. Just leave your money here towards my 25-year gift and get out. But if it turns out that you suffer from what I suffer from, you may go to your grave and never really have a handle on what was wrong. It just seems to be an endless series of bad breaks and misunderstandings. And it is. And there's over 95% of people like you and me will do that. And it is not alcohol. It's something that sounds like alcohol, and we talk a lot about drinking. It's called alcoholism. You say, what the hell's the difference between alcohol and alcoholism? A little three-letter suffix. That little three-letter suffix, I've come to believe, I've come to understand, is what gives me a terminal illness, and when I recognize it, it gives me a chance to get more comfortable than people who never had it. But it's a very, very funny thing. And what's the difference? The difference is just this. Stopping drinking cures an alcohol problem. In alcoholism, it's a terrible shock to discover stopping drinking has no effect on it whatsoever, except to make it more painful. Sobriety, reality, is the painful end of alcoholism. That is why alcoholics drink. There's a certain surge in not drinking, but then the same problems come back, and the same frustrations, and the same desperations, and the inability to cope with the pressures on you, and the terrible things. And you get to a point where you can hardly stand it. And you get up in the morning and the world starts to gray out. The colors are there, but they just look gray. When you really feel bad, they're just gray. Gray house, and gray family, and gray car, and gray job, and gray everything. And you get to a point where you can't stand it almost. Now, there are millions of people who get like that who are not alcoholics. They are called medically intense or acute neurotics. They see reality, but they react badly to it, and obsessively, and with these strong emotional reactions and overreactions. If they do not find an answer, the problem is they may snap and become psychotic. When you become psychotic, it's the ultimate defense of the human mind. That's when it lowers an artificial perception of reality to protect itself from extreme conflict. Now, it's a funny thing. Alcoholics almost never become psychotic. Almost never become psychotic, it turns out. They say insanity is the second greatest cause of death. Not from psychosis. It's caused by when you have enough alcohol in your system long enough, it erodes your brain. Alcoholic insanity is not measured by acting funny. If you've never, I doubt very many people ever in this room have ever seen a case of alcoholic insanity. I've seen a few of them, I wish I hadn't. You just sit on a porch and people come and change your diapers 3 times a day, and they feed you and put you to bed and get you up in the morning and change your diapers and feed you, and you never, ever get better. The brain is gone. But that doesn't happen to neurotics. They become psychotic and alcoholics don't. Why? Because alcoholics, when it gets bad enough long enough, will take a few drinks and relieve the pressure. So that begs the question, well, why don't the neurotics take a few drinks? They do. And then comes the other end of the equation. It doesn't relieve the pressure. That's why they're not alcoholics. It turns out the hallmark of the alcoholic is not what alcohol does to you, although that will come along later. It turns out the one thing we all have in common is what alcohol does for us. And I never knew anybody that drank with me that ever thought alcohol did more for them than it did for other people. Alcohol has an almost immediate effect on my body. I had no idea that it doesn't have on most bodies. It almost immediately alters my perception of reality. It almost immediately alters my relationship to my environment. It almost instantly makes me larger and more self-contained and them smaller and less threatening. And that's why in chapter 3, it reads so well, the great obsession of all of us is that somehow, someday we will control and enjoy our drinking. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. It astonishes people around us. It astonishes us. Why do I keep going through this? And Father talks about how there's brief recoveries, we get control again, followed always by worse relapse. When you get to that terrible condition, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And that isn't when you're drunk, that's when you're sober. And it's just all coming down. And it's just, the curse of alcoholism is that eventually reality gets bad enough so you have to drink. And the curse of drinking is that eventually gets bad enough that you have to get sober. And that combination is called alcoholism. And it does make a difference if you're a man who put the flag on the moon or if you're the man who came out from under a bridge. When you got it, there is no way out because you cannot make sustained reality. Because every time alcohol works for you, it interferes with your ability to live in reality. It distorts perceptions. And that is why it's such a difficult thing to treat. Today, I want to just spend a couple of minutes on this, then I'm not going to take much longer. Today there's a great deal of controversy, not so much anymore, but there has been over the years, about treatment centers. Old-timers who got sober years ago are not very pleased with the treatment center concept. You know, we got sober, and by God, we stayed sober. And they did, and I did. And it's just difficult. And I'll tell you something. I spent most of my early sobriety, and for 15 years, I hardly even wanted to talk to people who came out of treatment centers because I thought they were pukes. As I've gotten a little more sophisticated, I've come to realize there's a difference. There are good treatment centers and bad treatment centers. But it's hard to tell which are which. And your life depends on deciding which is which. You think, why would anyone want to go to a treatment center anyway? And the best analogy I've been able to think of is like going up to Lake Superior, say at Ashland, and I want to go to Canada. And there's a nice little small yacht sitting there with attendants in their white uniforms, and you smell dinner cooking. They say, won't you come with us on the SS treatment center? And you said, maybe. And over here are two guys lurking in the underbrush along the shore saying, we're from AA. You want to come with us in our invisible boat? Nobody in their right mind is going to get in an invisible boat if they can get on that stinking treatment center ship. So you get on there and you're glad. It's comfortable, it's nice, it's warm, and they feed you, and it's good. And the only problem is you just get out of sight of shore. They say, well, this is where we turn back. Got to go back and get another load. What am I going to do? Well, just swim like hell. And you're out there swimming. And here come these two pukes in their invisible boat. You want to ride, buddy? I'm not that sick. Yeah. And pretty soon you're drowning again. Here they come again. You want to ride, buddy? Yeah. You get in, and as soon as you dry off, you realize, this is stupid. There's no boat here. We're floating in midair. It's goofy. What am I supposed to do, you guys? Grab an oar and row. Yeah. Crazy. Right then, anybody with sense goes, adios, mother. And then finally, you're drowning one more time. Do you want to get in our boat? Yeah, get in. What do you want me to do? Well, grab an oar and row. Oh, you silly bastards. And the irony of AA is, as you begin to row, the boat appears. But it doesn't appear until you begin to row. And you got to be desperate to row an invisible boat, that's all. And that's what sponsors are for. They come along from time to time and say, hey, goof, you got your oar upside down. As you row, the boat appears. If you keep rowing long enough, you get a very fine craft. Pretty soon it exceeds the SS treatment center. Pretty soon it gets to be as big and nice as you want to make it. And the only sad thing is, no matter how long it takes, when you start to rest on your oar and don't row, it begins to disappear again. And if you wait long enough, you're back in the water. That is why people with 25 years of sobriety get drunk, and 30 years and 15 years, because they've got where they want to be and there's no sense rowing anymore. I'm there. And somehow that's the function of AA, is to encourage, to re-encourage one another, to recommit ourselves to keep rowing no matter how I'm doing, to keep rowing. That's what the boat is about. The function of AA and its steps and its sponsors and these actions and involvement are not to make you wonderful. They're to do something infinitely more complex. They are to upgrade my perception of reality. I got to look at the same things and over a period of time see them differently, or I'm going to think it's so depressing I can't handle it. And you got to keep going, and you got to keep trying this. And unfortunately for you and me, no matter how hard you work the program, you will never rise above being a basic human being, as we talked about this afternoon. And human beings are weak and fallible and cross and emotional. And they are paradoxes. I love all mankind, except you, you son of a bitch. Just on and on and on. Just, no matter how you get. And I'll tell you how you know when things are going bad. Because people look funny. And they act funny. My sponsor told me that years ago. He said, if you ever want to know how you're doing, don't examine yourself. Examine the people around you. If they look good, you're doing good. If they look bad, you're doing bad. That's all. But these people find out when you're tired, and they act funny. That's why they say in AA, don't get too hungry or angry or lonely or tired. Not because they're bad things, but because they are perception distorters. I get on that Santa Monica freeway in the morning, I go to work, I'm tired, and I say, I'm not going to let anybody know I'm tired. And I can see them on the freeway. I don't know how they find out. Total strangers. An old lady said, see the boy in the blue LTD? He's very tired. I'm going to cut that little son of a bitch off. I don't know how they know. So all we ask of you is you do these things not for your sake, but to keep them shaped up. I am so grateful. In AA, I've come to believe in God. I believe in God like I used to believe when I was little, only I'm not afraid of him anymore. Someone I could talk to. I've watched my family, all of my kids. I admire those people in AA whose children have grown up to be in AAs themselves. I think it's wonderful, but I'm also pleased. I got 5 kids, all have grown up and never taken a drug and never taken a drink and all doing well in college faculties around the country and doing great, and I'm proud of them. They had a hard way to go. I'm pleased that my parents and I are close. My father and I didn't talk for 10 years at one time, and now he's living in our house in California, so I was down to just see my mother. You know, Claire, she's old and feeble, but now she cries when I leave, which is a switch. And all of these things are very nice, but the greatest gift I can tell you is to be able to walk out into the street, whether it's Nicollet Avenue, or whether it's Barstow Street, or whether it's Biscayne Boulevard in Miami, or whether it's Market Street in San Francisco, or First Avenue in Seattle, or Irving Street in Dallas, to walk into any street with a reasonable sense that they're going to look all right and you're going to make it out there. Because your perceptions change. Things look different. There's only one thing I want to warn you before I sit down. Don't do it too long, because you get your perceptions changed more than you wanted. When I was 15 years sober, I had it just where I wanted it. Marketing director for a publishing firm, my family growing up, everything was fine. And I kept active and sponsoring these pukes and doing things. And one day I found myself leaving a job in Beverly Hills, and for the last 10 years I haven't been a successful marketing executive anymore. I'm the director of the Midnight Mission on Skid Row, the place that 86'd me in 1958. And my friend said, why would you want to give up this tremendous career to run that stinking place on Skid Row? And I had to tell him. I told him I'd come back and get him someday. I'm in a situation much more. I'm not in a treatment center. We're way below that level. We're just trying to keep guys alive. And almost every day I watch alcoholics die or be taken away to alcoholic insanity. And some days when I'm tired or cross, it's just so depressing. I think, what am I doing here? I live out by the ocean. I want to just stay. I don't want to go and watch another guy die. I just can't bear it. But other days when I go to work and I'm feeling good, I remember what I'm doing there. Once in a while we can get some guy out of there. We have in our group a number of guys now who started off laying face down on that street on Skid Row. And now they're married and doing well and feeling well. And you look at that side of it. And when I go home at night, I feel more like a man than I ever felt going down all the elevators in Beverly Hills, snapping my fingers and how slick I am. But it all boils down to one thing. If you're new tonight, don't misunderstand me. I can't guarantee you that in 15 years, if you go to meetings and work the steps, you can have your own mission. You know. You may have to get rich. But I can tell you this, anything can happen if you'll just remember to do this. Keep rowing. Keep rowing. Keep rowing. It makes it all okay. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.